Hello, and welcome to the Dynamic Man Experience, a podcast dedicated to men who want to become the 10.0 version of themselves through mastering the three key relationships of mindset, money, and the many people in their lives, creating long-lasting, deep connections and trusted bonds for real appreciation and understanding. Relationship wrecker number 6. Grief. That's right. Really is such a sneaky wrecker of relationships. And I found that out the hard way. It's so undercover. I mean, it's the ultimate sneaky bastard. It's grief. You think you're done with it. You think you're over it. You think you've dealt with it. But then deep down, it's just lurking, just waiting for its chance to pounce and kick you in the nuts. Really knock you off your perch. And when it happens on both sides of a partnership, as it happened to me in Hawaii on the island of Maui, there's nothing worse than getting your ass kicked in paradise, let me tell you. That really sucks. But for both of us, landing in Maui from Ireland and Spain, where we had been spending our time, and away from family, away from support circles, man, did it pounce. Grief, just, why did it have to wait until paradise? I'll never know. But what happened was, everything was hunky-dory. The thrill of landing in tropical paradise. It was a dream 20 years in the making for me and for my wife at the time. It was really something that she dreamt about as well. But it just wasn't meant to be. And, after the initial exhilaration and excitement of, being in Hawaii and all that entails, the beauty of it, the spectacular scenery, wow. Oh man, look at this. Just the beauty of an island in the middle of the Pacific with a dormant volcano on it. Wow, it was just really, really outrageously spectacular. When you allow grief to accumulate over the years, which we both had, maybe 3 years after my father died, 3 years after her grandmother died, her last parental figure, 6 years after my mother died, and there was a whole host of other deaths involved on both sides, and all unresolved. So, over time, yeah, and like we got there in May, landed in Maui in May, and by December, our relationship was broken beyond repair. And that was down to accumulated grief. Just reared its ugly head for both of us, but we didn't know what was going on. Slowly but gradually just reared its head, peeking out, and it rendered me speechless, which is unusual for an Irishman in paradise. anywhere for that matter. And I have to say, I confess to drinking like copious amounts of cheap wine, ship wine, beers, cheap whiskey from Costco, ridiculous 2 litre bottles of Jameson, like they were cheaper in Hawaii and they were 20 minutes from where it's made, where I'm from. And yeah, I just didn't know what was going on. I couldn't articulate my feelings. I just lost the plot, lost my motivation, even to surf, to work, to any of that. Nothing was going right for me, in the relationship, even though, the will was there. The knowledge or I suppose the emotional intelligence to understand what was going on, it just didn't register with us. And she couldn't handle my silence, my unwillingness to speak, my inability to speak, and it just went pear-shaped. It just went arse over tits, and pretty soon, we weren't communicating too well. And in fairness, the love was there, but it was definitely a case of we just couldn't figure out what was going wrong. Everything had been, hunky-dory until then. We had some great adventures, 3 seasons in the Spanish Pyrenees, a couple of summers in Nantucket, a couple of summers in Ireland. It was like we were, really involved with a really artistic business that we'd managed to, create something really unique. Hardwood mood lights, different colors, shapes, sculptures, and showed our work in, London, Cork, in a 900-year-old church in Cork, did exhibitions in the Pyrenees, in Barcelona, and we even got one of our lights into the Catalan Parliament in Barcelona to the Catalan Independence Party leader, and it was really exciting times. We decided to take our business to Hawaii, where the wood is even more spectacular than Ireland, and the opportunities were, much better. So good. Like within 6 months, we'd found a sponsor, a patron, a place to exhibit our work in Maui and the art center, the Hui Noi. Like our sponsor had found us a workshop, and within a matter of weeks of having that workshop, we'd found a place to sell our work. So everything was on the up and up, pushing ourselves, really making a go of it, but it was just too much. We couldn't really grasp what was going on. To have put in all that groundwork, hard groundwork, and traveling halfway across the world to make it happen. And suddenly, that undercover grief just jumped out of the bushes and ambushed us, and, boom. Our relationship imploded spectacularly, and there was just no coming back from it, which was heartbreaking really. And I ended up leaving Maui, leaving her behind. She's still there 10 years later, and I ended up going from surfing on the north shore of Maui in what was it, 30, 35 degrees Celsius, 80 degrees, 90 degrees Fahrenheit, to finding myself in the snow up in British Columbia, a place called Red Mountain. And I remember the people I was staying with inviting me to dinner with these people one night, and sitting around the table with 6 strangers, and I was thinking, What is this universe? What parallel universe am I in? The only comparison really was the whiskey was just as cheap. No consolation because, wow. But the upshot of it was that we went to a counsellor on Maui. We had met him at a friend's house and told us what he was doing. He was all interested in what we were at. And when it came to the counselling, he was able to pinpoint exactly what was wrong with me. You're still grieving. I'll never forget that moment because everything made sense. I thought I'd sorted it all out, but no. I was still grieving. And so was she, but he wasn't able to penetrate her mask, nor was I. Once that was discovered, the dam burst for me. The dam absolutely burst. Talk about waterworks. I'd say I cried from the start of January until the end of April, which is crying in Maui. It's not so bad. But when you're travelling up a ski lift in British Columbia in the middle of winter, I thought my eyeballs would freeze inside my head. And some days, visibility was non-existent. No visibility whatsoever. I'd find myself just collapsing on my knees. Just literally on my knees. And that was it. That was grief. Grief at work. It kicked me in the nuts. It kicked me in the coconuts. Sensational. Sensational. Took me a long time to get over that. I really did not like my Spanish woman after that for a long time. Took me a long time to accept what happened and move on with my life. But some things are just not meant to be. And honestly, much as I love Hawaii, much as I love Maui, it wasn't the right place for me right then. And that's how I found myself, changing tack and getting into this work, coaching men, going through the hardships of, having their relationships wrecked in different ways, the recovery time, the breakup, protocols that we don't have, and how we find ourselves. I've never felt so alone. But thanks to that counsellor, therapist, whatever you want to call him, I was able to finally get to the bottom of what was going on. And that changed my life. And that's what I do. I never saw her again. But she was kind enough to get the divorce sorted. She called me one time soon afterwards and she was asking me, where do I send the divorce cert? And I was like, what the fuck do I want a divorce cert for? Do you think I'm going to hang it up on the wall somewhere? No. So, closure. That was a cold, cold, cold breakup. And it all boiled down to grief. And I often wonder where we would be now if we had taken it upon ourselves to go and see the right people to talk about grief, to talk about, the red flags and all that. But there you go. Relationship wrecker number 6, grief. After that harrowing experience. I ended up back on the East Coast, drinking too much, smoking too much weed. You know, it's not just a relationship wrecker as such, it's what you do to your own head. And that's ultimately where we depend on too much on others to keep ourselves sane. And that's why I am doing the work I do right now, helping guys that go through wreckages of relationships and need to rediscover their lost energy, restore their lost energy, and get back on track with purpose, with meaning, with fulfillment, synchronizing their mindset, their relationships with other people, partners, loved ones, and money. So we are completely dependent on ourselves for belief, confidence, respect, and gratitude. Appreciating ourselves, our best efforts, and finding true freedom in having no expectations from others, and largely doing it ourselves, granting ourselves thanks, appreciation, and, we don't need anything from anyone. When people see that we don't need anything from them, that's true freedom. That's total freedom. That's when people notice. That's when people sit up and take notice. So if you need help with that, I'm your man, men's relationship expert and man of experience. I had my ass kicked in paradise. Don't let it happen to you. Get in touch. DM me. Let's get it on. Call it what you want. But as guys, there's an exciting challenge to being a man these days. And it doesn't take that much to really stand out. And look, you are not as far away from where you want to be, as you might think. Not when you can look at it from a different angle and get a better appreciation for the experience that has got you this far. You could call it a psychological cold plunge. It's time to freshen things up. Being a dynamic man. That is the challenge today.